Welcome to Tenkara in Focus. Today we've got something different for you. We're actually at Chatsworth Country Fair in Derbyshire. We've got the River Derwent behind us. If you've seen our syndicate streams, this is the lower stretches. We usually fish on the very headwaters. We're trying something different today. I'll let Paul explain a bit more.
Yeah, it's basically letting John off the leash and getting him busy with his filmmaking skills. I had a really fascinating session, really, problem-solving session of fishing, and John basically documented it, and then we talked through it. So it's like a lovely exposure of a story of a day on the river. So sit back and enjoy the River Derwent in all its glory. Just at the end of a really nice session there, and quite interesting, quite challenging. We came out with the intent of filming stuff for tuition, for downloads material, actually for manipulation techniques, to recreate our manipulations content. And as usual, the fish decided that, well, perhaps they had other ideas. We've got quite bright conditions, quite low water. But we did start out with using a very bright, sort of visible casting line. I know a lot of people, they often say, it's really useful to be able to see the line during the tuition stuff, and that is true. But just sometimes, not all the time, but just occasionally when it is very bright, as it is today, and the water is very low, that bright line can sometimes put the fish off, particularly when you're having to bring them up near the surface. We did start out, we thought, this time of year on our local rivers, there's often a good chance of some hatches of very big active flies, particularly large mayflies. And that can be excellent sort of territory for using manipulated presentations. So that was the idea. We started out full of hope, sort of initially straight on with a nice big cream Circassa from the DT range. Put that on, but it seemed that fishing through some very promising water, no dice, so maybe the fly's not right, maybe it's a bit big for the conditions. The few fish we do see rising, they're just sipping quite delicately below the surface, and we're not seeing the big mayflies hatching. So you get these doubts running through your mind, and maybe the pink line's putting them off as well. So changed to a more drab coloured line and put, I think initially I started off on a dark Futsukibari, so a smaller, about a size 14, black thread body. Got it here, got the full documentation. You'll see this is the sequence of the flies that we went through. So yeah, smaller, what you'd say Nishigaki style Futsukibari. And we had a couple of fish come up to that, but didn't actually manage to hook any of them. They were coming up and I could see them just under the surface, come right up to the fly, either millimetres from the fly or actually almost bumping it with their noses and then turning away. And as you went to set the hook, because they were so close to the fly had disappeared, they'd obscured it as they came up to sort of to inspect it. So as they turned away, you've got to set that hook. But just fresh air, not contacting the fish at all. So they're obviously, just that last second, something wasn't quite right for them. And again, because we've got that low, what we'd say, background noise condition today, that sort of favours the smaller flies. And we talk about that a lot in the How to Fool Fish with Simple Flies book. It's a core concept in fishing, and particularly in Tenkara with very simple flies. So as well as the reducing that signal from the size of the fly by going smaller and quite sparse as well, using finer tippet can be important in low, sort of spooky conditions, simply because either the effect of that tippet or even the presence of that tippet, if it's a little bit shiny, that becomes more obvious because there's less to disguise it. So dropped down, I didn't have any with me, so dashed over to John, pilfering John's tackle bag again. Went with the finer tippet and a small fly, fishing in quite shallow water. Starting to see the odd fish moving a little bit more now. Some splashy rises, but mostly, quite delicate, steady, considered rises. They're not chasing after things, they're not aggressive. They're waiting for stuff to come to them. And again, oftentimes when they start coming to the fly, they'd actually spook off it. So, and I think what changed our fortunes a little bit was that there were started to be little pulses of these olive mayfly hatching off. It just made the difference because there was a bit of natural food around, whatever it was, so the fish became a bit more active, a bit more switched on. And I switched then actually to similar size of fly to the black stiff hackle one, but one with just a little bit more soft pulsation to it. But again, smaller than what we'd started with. And that's where we started to get some results then. Not huge fish, it's a wild population here, so you get the full spread of different sizes. The fish, when they're feeding in the shallow water, often there are lies that bigger fish probably wouldn't feel that comfortable in. But we started getting some action and some good success. I think as well that drab casting line was really helping them commit. So the smaller fly, the finer tippet, drab line, they started committing to the fly and actually getting the hook sets. Now one of the fish got their head down in the weed a little bit, and we sort of, we brought up quite a long strand of quite gunky weed, and I know I struggled a few times just keeping my feet from time to time, just to, because the rocks are quite slimy. There's a little bit of nutrient enrichment in this section, and with that low water, not much dilution there. So we had some slippery rocks, sort of bowling balls covered in Vaseline, sort of wading, and some fun fish captures. And there was one section where, I felt a little bit hard done to, because I think probably the best fish of the day. It was in quite a shallow, very flat section, so I dropped down again to even sparser this time, because even that sort of smaller soft hackle fly I felt was a bit too big of a profile in that completely flat water, tight up against the bank. Got a good hook set on a nice fish, and it put a good bend in the rod, gave me a bit of a run around. Just starting to see my side of the argument, and for whatever reason the hook just pulls out, and I thought, I felt like that was one that was, I'd earned that one. I think I'd probably deserved it, dropped down the fly size, got that slowed presentation just right, a little fraction slower than the true dead drift. Fish slammed it confidently, seemed like a solid hook hold, but it wasn't to be. So I think that, with that, we said, right, let's move upstream, let's go and have a look at some other little bits, see what we can find, see what kind of techniques we can maybe demonstrate. And we got to a slightly deeper bit and more turbulence as well. And I had a few drifts through with that successful fly, because I'd obviously got confidence in it. Plenty of fish were taking it. But after a first few drifts where, I knew there were fish in there, confident there was fish in there, and just nothing, no reaction. So I just thought, well, maybe that small fly in that deeper water, maybe that's asking a bit too much of a fish to come up off the bottom all that way. Again, calories in and calories out that we talk about in the book quite a lot. So I thought, well, gut feeling, let's go. I'm going to go bigger again and a bit chunkier, but also nice and mobile too, because I fancied a bit of strong manipulation just to really draw attention to that fly in that deeper and more turbulent sort of situation. So again, more background noise, we up the signal of the fly a bit. I was trying to just get position between, well, that's during a drift, and I was thinking, I'm not very stable here, I need to move my feet a bit, but it's ever so slippery, so I don't want to, make a fool of myself and go in, and I'm just looking down to sort of take a few steps, and the fly just dangling in the water. And as I look up, the fish was already on the line, so absolutely zero skill involved. And as is often the case with that as well, obviously it was a really solid hook hold, and there's no way it was coming off like that previous one. But I guess I sort of feel when we got that fish in the net, it's like, well, I had one where I thought a bit hard done by, a bit cheated perhaps earlier on, and then one that I definitely didn't deserve. So maybe, on balance, maybe that evened out at the end of the session.